Welcome. Sister Cities of Franklin Williamson County presents, I'll say it once again, Passport to Germany. I want to first introduce our first speaker, Liam Woodcoff. He just returned from an internship in Bad Soden, Germany, and his family will be hosting an intern from Germany in September who will work with the city of Franklin, and you'll probably see him around town. And our illustrious Robert Mott and the communications department at the city of Franklin does a lot of following those interns around. So for sure, look for it. He might even appear on those top 3 things with Eric Stuckey. Without further ado, I will introduce Liam, and I will go ahead and get your slide pulled up.
And then let's look at that. So, hello, as Kim said, my name's Liam. I'm currently a senior at Franklin High School in the IB program. I've lived in Franklin for about 2 years now, and before that I was really fortunate to live in Zug, Switzerland for a few years, so that is actually where I was lucky enough to learn German. So I don't know, I'm sure if you heard of Bad Soden before, and I just think this talk is going to be what I learned from my experience in Germany. And the way I wanted to kind of connect that was through food. I've learned that I'm a very food-oriented person, and I think going on the trip definitely taught me that because I was really focused whenever I went, ooh, what can I try, where can I try? So I think that's how I kind of helped to structure this talk, though I'm not really going to go into depth about the food itself. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually water on this slide. Bad Soden is really famous for its Mineralquellen, like the Champagnerbrunnen at the top or the Sardinenbrunnen on the end there. And Bad Soden, really its history starts as a Kurort, or a cure town, and that is because people would come from all over Germany, especially the southern Germany, to try and drink these waters for their health. And I found that really interesting that it still is part of the town, because that I always thought it was a part of the town's history, and they had the big building like the Badehaus, on which I'm not sure if I have a picture of, but the town was founded on this principle of the water, and it's even in its name, and I just found it interesting that it was still there in all the public parks. So, yeah. Moving on. So the first day, one of the first things that I was able to try was actually at a dinner with IKUS. It was one of the first days, and IKUS is the German version of this partner city program. And it was at restaurant Grüne Baum, and I was able to try Frankfurt Schnitzel. And Frankfurt Schnitzel is similar to the more famous, I think, Wiener Schnitzel, but it's just a little bit thicker. That's at least what I took. I'm not really sure the entire difference, but it was really good. And there was a lot of different sauces on it. And I think that this was a really good first step because it really introduced me to something else about Bad Soden that I hadn't really known, and that is the other parts of the town. The city itself is almost made up of 3 small villages. It also includes these areas of Neuenhain and Altenhain, and this restaurant of the Grüne Baum was in the village of Neuenhain, and it was really interesting to see this second little area of the town, especially because as the week went on and I was an intern in the city department, I did hear about and learn about these different areas of the city. And I thought that was something that I wouldn't have learned if I didn't go and try some schnitzel. And then the next slide, we were able to go into Frankfurt for one day. And one of the first things that we did there is we got to see the Neumarkthalle. And the Neumarkthalle is a famous thing in Frankfurt because it is almost the city's big market. And it's open every day. And there's tons of food from all over the world. There's Turkish stands, Greek stands. And it was just an amazing thing to see and get to try all of the different foods within Frankfurt. And that's actually, Susanne and Michael Hein, who are involved in the IKUS program in Bad Soden, Germany. And next to that is the mother from my host family, Helen Hamstra. And these are all photos from the city of Frankfurt. And then the other thing I want to talk about is when we were there that first day, we tried we had something that they called Kaffee and Kuchen. And Kaffee and Kuchen is almost like the German equivalent to a British tea, almost. That's the only way I can describe it. And it's exactly almost what it sounds like. It's just coffee and cake, and you get to say it. And one thing that I thought was really interesting is when we sat down in this cafe, we were equidistant from up in the top right of the screen, the Goethe house, and Goethe was a famous German philosopher, and across the street there was a piece of the Berlin Wall. And I thought that was a really interesting thing that really showed a lot about the history of Frankfurt, because around the whole city you can see these really old buildings contrast to high-rise skyscrapers, which is, I thought, very unique for the city. And most cities in Europe, you don't see these skyscrapers, and I thought it was really interesting to see. And especially with the Berlin Wall, we were there on the anniversary of the signing, I can't exactly remember, but it was the signing of the first Congress in Frankfurt in the Paulskirche. I don't remember exactly the date.
So we were actually there for the first sign, or the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution of 1949 It's best in this Germany. So can't read it.
Yeah, sorry. Couldn't remember the exact holiday, but it was really interesting because there was something because of just these different areas of history that are all within the city. And then the next, later in the week, I was at the city doing internship in the Parks Department. I was able to learn a lot about the different areas of Bad Soden. And later in the week, we got to go to the restaurant Rote Mühle, which is just outside of the city of Bad Soden. As you can see, it's out in the farmer's field, and you can see the skyline of Frankfurt from there. And I got to have one of my favorite dishes in Switzerland that you really can't get here, and that was Spargel, and it's a white asparagus dish, and it was so good, really, just to finally have it again, and I kind of been waiting for it almost that whole first week. And it was really, and I really enjoyed that night because it was really interesting to see the table with so many different people. It was a mix of English and German, and it was just really interesting to see how sometimes a conversation would start in English, transform into German, then go back into English. And I think it really taught me a lot in seeing a lot about the Sister City's message of bringing cultures together. And I thought at that big long table with all these conversations going on, it was just really interesting to see how everything switched between the different languages, and people started to talk about things that were similar between Bad Soden and Franklin and things that were different. The next day after the restaurant was a holiday in Germany. It was the holiday for Fronleichnam, which is their version of Corpus Christi, which is a Catholic holiday. And so on that day, I was not in the city because all the offices were closed, and I got to go to a nearby village of Idstein. And Idstein is famous for something called Fachwerkhäuser, which I'll show more on the next slide, and it's those houses with the timber frames in them. And when I was there, I got to try 2 of the traditional foods that I had seen people at the restaurants try, but I was just a little afraid to try with people around. I wanted to do that by myself. And the first one was Handkäse mit Musik. And Handkäse mit Musik, it's a cheese dish with vinegar and onions. And the reason I was really wondered, because I thought it was an interesting name, hand cheese with music. And so I kind of asked some people to explain it for me. The hand cheese came apparently from that it was shaped with the hands when they make the cheese. And with music, whenever I asked them what it was, I always got the joke that the music comes later. And the one dish I also got to try was the famous Frankfurt Grüne Soße. I did not enjoy it as much as the Handkäse mit Musik, and I didn't know what it was then, and I still do not know what it is now. I know it's green sauce, and that's about it.
Worsley. It's Worsley. No.
And these are the Fachwerkhäuser that the village is so famous for. It's actually on something in Germany that they call the Fachwerkhäuser Weg. Sorry, that's a long word. And it is a road that connects a lot of these villages that have these types of timber-framed houses. And I thought this was a really interesting way to see in the village because of the way they preserved them. They still live in these old houses with these timber, and they made sure that they preserved the timber portion of these houses. Like, for example, in some of the renovated ones, you'll see those little gaps between the plaster, and they thought, we want another window, but we want to keep the house, so they just took the plaster out and put a window frame in. And it was just really interesting to see how they're living in all these houses from medieval and how they were adapted for modern day, while still maintaining the preservation and the charm that the village is known for. And then the next week, after working in the city, I was able to go to a different family, and with them we were able to visit the city of Heidelberg. And one big thing that I was reminded of food in Heidelberg is the Große Fass, which is the middle picture there, and it's a big barrel. As you can see at the bottom there, the woman in pink, that's a person, and this is in the Castle of Heidelberg. And it would have originally been filled with wine, although you do hear stories saying that because it was so big, by the time they actually went to drink the wine, it was more like vinegar. And I also thought that was a really cool connection with Bad Soden, because I think a lot of people think of Germany and they only think of beer, but the week I was in Bad Soden, they had regionally famous, I guess you could say, Bad Soden Wine Fest, and it was really interesting to see that there are also other things than the stereotypical German beer. And of course, it wasn't only German food either. We also had some Italian food and other different cultures in Germany that I think I'm going to use to build a little further on. But before I do that, I'm just going to take one little step away to talk about the student prison of the University of Heidelberg. Sorry. So the student prison was used from 1823 up till 1914 by the university, and the university got special permission from the city to be allowed to punish their own students for crimes. As you can see now, it's being preserved now for these paintings and graffiti that all the students did when they were in there. And these Sorry, and they've been kind of being studied now to see the different opinions of the students and how they might not have been different than the university at the time. And you can see they're still working really hard to preserve these now. And then something else I want to talk about was in Frankfurt, when talking about food, is the Bahnhofsviertel. The Bahnhofsviertel is sort of now almost an infamous area of Frankfurt. It's known for being a little bit more dangerous than other areas of the city. But with the father from my host family, we would actually go in there to one section for lunch. And it was really interesting because there's so many cultures living in this one area of the city. There would be a Turkish coffee house next to a Greek restaurant, next to an Indian restaurant. And it was really interesting to see how in Germany, that I think people a lot of times think is only one culture, or think of only the German cultures. It really is filled, it's become a very multicultural nation, which I think a lot of people don't think about. And going on that, we were also able to try even in the small villages. So, example, this is the small village of Königstein, just above Bad Soden. And there were Thai restaurants and Indian restaurants, and maybe one of the most German experiences ever, which was the castle ruins. And I think what makes this castle especially German was the long, about 300-foot tunnel underneath the castle that you had to walk through to exit, which had no lights in it. So there was about one employee there, and she just pretty much sat there and made sure you paid to get in. No one got in free. But then once you were in there, you had the 300-foot dark tunnel, and I don't know, maybe she cared if you got out. I don't know. She wasn't there when I left, so I don't know if she was really checking that well. But that is one thing that I definitely learned in Germany, that they really feel that you should take accountability for your own actions. And if you are going to go in through dark tunnel, make sure you do come out. If you don't come out, well, you shouldn't have went in the dark tunnel in the first place. And I think keeping with the food, the other thing that I really enjoyed about Bad Soden was seeing how close they were to nature and where the food was grown. Immediately surrounding the city, there were all the farmers' fields with the cows. And it was really interesting for me was that from these fields, you were maybe 20 minutes outside of Frankfurt, and you could still see the Frankfurt skyline from there, which I feel that often in the U.S., whenever you have a big city, you can only see the skyline surrounded by suburbs and other things. But here it's surrounded by big farmers' fields. And even in the middle of Frankfurt, these two pictures are the pictures on the other side are from the Palmer Garden and Botanical Garden within Frankfurt. And it really shows just how important it is that they still keep in touch with the natural areas in Germany. And I really enjoyed that because I feel like in some U.S. cities, we almost lost that. And I think that is a very good thing that we actually should preserve, is the access to nature like that. And so I think in Germany, I have really learned a lot. Even though I lived in Switzerland, I never really got to experience the German culture itself, because they are different countries. And it was really interesting to see just how different Germany was from its near neighbor, and especially see the differences between our sister city in Germany and our city. And on the last day, I got to go to Mainz and leave from the sunny area of Germany and take the train down into the mountains where it was nice and cloudy and rainy. So that never true. With that, yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. And
So my wife and I are going to do this presentation. I'll probably do most of the talking, but we thought it might be interesting to share the experience of going to a country beyond being in Kurds. We went for 18 months, got released after 4.5 years, ended up in Switzerland for 3 years, came back to the U.S., and after I made most of my career as a public accountant, as an auditor, working in large German companies near U.S. operations. So we're going to talk about our adventure from 1988 to 1993. So mid-day, I will tell you that one of my German colleagues told me we cannot go to German restaurants because only German grandfathers know how to cook. I want to go to Italian or French, anybody but German. That's that. So let's see if this works. If not, I'm going to have to bounce up and down. So anyway, so my wife Jackie is over here. She's my better three-quarter. So we went over for 18 months, and when I interviewed, it was interesting because, first of all, the guy that interviewed me, I swore was 6'2". He stood up and it was 6'9". So that was a little intimidating. And he offered me, I thought it was going to be 18 months in Munich, and he said, how about 4 years in Hamburg? Yeah. I said, I think I got to talk to my wife about that. So we ended up agreeing was, I think with 18 months, we would do 18 months, and then we'd see about staying on. And it was kind of an interesting process because it was decided almost immediately I would have to go, probably with that month, 2 months. And I talked to the partner who I worked with, and they said, fine. So I was going to start, I think we were going to go over about October 1st, thereabouts. We had to ship everything over, and then my partner said, no, you can't leave until we sign off on November 1st. So we signed off on November 1st. I flew out on November 1st, and they got landed on the 2nd. They were a little surprised to see me. I think she came in on maybe the 3rd. We had to go house up. We were told we'd have to find a place to live that's fully furnished, and it can't exceed this price. Hamburg, Germany, 1.8 million people. For 2 choices. That's one was okay. So I think we took a day of rest. We flew back. We didn't have visas at that point in time. They hadn't been approved yet. I had essentially a few days to wrap up my career at Boston and get ready to go forth. And I had the occasion, I'm working until about 11 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden, I'm stepping out of our building, which is a 40-story building, when I hear a car brakes screeching. Parker comes running in. Demon, 7:30 tomorrow, proposal. Yeah. No thanks. David, I didn't hear me. 7:30 tomorrow. Beat it. No thanks. So I start work in Germany next week. For 18 months. Okay, bye. Kind of how it works in public accounting. We had a 20-month-old. When we finally got back, he was 9. We had our youngest who was born in Germany while we were there in the Walfeld. It was fascinating. We got to go into Eastern Europe shortly thereafter. I later worked in Switzerland for auditing food companies, Kraft, and General Mills or General Foods outside of the U.S. And while I was there, they did 30 due diligences in Central Eastern Europe. I got to go visit some of the places. I chose not to go to Russia. I sent a team from London to Russia deliberately. She got a nice book from the Hermitage, yes. First Gulf War started, European Union began, and what was interesting, we had exchange students, one an entire school year, 1999 and 2000, I think, and then the other...
2000, 2001.
Yeah, I'm all the wrong. And then the other one was 2002...
2003.
Right.
He also was for.
Oh, yeah. Yes. But it was great. My mom thought we were crazy in the first 6 days, and she was trying to talk me out of it. And I'm like, no, I know them. What do you mean I know them? Little Christian from next part. We don't know the state. And it's the same team. Go ahead.
While you were there, you had an exchange.
I got sent back to Michigan. To Michigan, and we had them in Michigan.
That's
Which was interesting. Okay. I've covered a fair amount of that. Jack and Ray, do you want to do the stove and the furnace?
Well, what about the bureaucracies? David, the office manager set up different things, but they wouldn't give him a work permit until he had a residency permit. But they wouldn't give him a residency permit until he had a work permit.
And they were about a mile apart.
Yeah. So he's going back and forth applying, can you give me a temporary one? And that's how it finally happened. You're trying to put together shipping, and I have 21-month-old, we're going over for, we think 18 months, so we had 43 boxes that got shipped. And things may have changed in the years since we were there, but the moving company was not in a rush to deliver my boxes, and they didn't want to deal with a woman. I told New York that I was going to be on the next plane, first class, with my son home if I didn't have my boxes the next day. I had my boxes the next day. Nicely done. Always quite fun about. So
It encouraged her. You took attention? Yes, we'll see.
Let's just say I had been an executive before I retired to have children. So I didn't take kindly to the backlash. Anyhow, we rented this house, and it was more or less poured concrete, no basement. What we didn't know was that it had been the people we rented it from, parents' house. But the parents, one had died, and one was in a nursing home, and they just turned everything off. Which meant the heat, the electricity, whatever, but there was no air circulation. So when we turned everything on, black mold started cropping up everywhere. And then all of a sudden the stove didn't work, and one of the people was like, well, maybe you should read the directions. It's like, it worked for 2 weeks. You know, there's a different mentality. And then finding people to take care of and remediate. I do speak German. I was my German was not very good back then. Not that it's much better, but I can do anything in German. So you're trying to deal with this. And of course, our last name is Fox, which is a very German name. So they just assume you're German and you speak German. And their reaction is, what do you mean Frau Haas doesn't speak German? So it's a different mentality. So our first phone bill was like over $1,000.
There was no detail.
No detail.
No detail.
No detail.
Fortunately, I'd made a lot of phone calls to our New York office.
And you was thinking they would go.
Not well, it was me calling the New York office, saying, I need help, or we need to do this. You know, I got to the office in Germany. They wouldn't give me a key because they said only partners can have a key. You're not a partner. That lasted about 1 week. They'd never seen anybody get as much mail as I did. And their normal policy was to ship the mail to the clients or to your house. They decided it was better to give me a key and let me pick it up on the weekend.
So before Dave moved over to Germany, Dave was like, oh, my driver's license is going to expire in the near future. I need a new driver's license. Well, according to the German insurance companies, he had only been driving for 3 months. So therefore, our first insurance bill was about $2,400. And this is in 1988. And because they thought he had only been driving for 3 months, not since he was 16.
So I got to prepare, I think it was about 10 to 12 pages, single space, in English, deliberately, a history of my driving. And I had a copy of my certificate from driver's ed. I'd had a couple of traffic violations. I got the original insurance company to give me information. And what I didn't know was the highest class of lawyer in Germany is the Notar. The notary costs 1,000 Deutschmarks to start with that. So I had the secretary pay every single document she could. Submitted everything, and a few months later, they reduced it to 600. I went from being a bad foreigner to an okay one. And my colleague said that was kind of about right. The Montagwagen, I had an Audi. I bought a used Audi. And I went to start it. I waited about 4 days trying to figure out whether I had insurance. Went to start it, wouldn't start. Never moved it. So we had to get the starter replaced. And I drove my first client, which is in Bremen, which is about an hour and 15 minutes from Hamburg. Most of it's Autobahn. So being a good American boy, I wanted to test the Autobahn. It's very interesting. It's 2 lanes. And I learned very quickly that the truck going 50 kilometers an hour will pass the truck coming 49 kilometers. And the Porsche going 260 kilometers an hour will come up on it very quick. Now, I wasn't going that fast, but you'd have spiritual conversations with the Lord, and then you learn lessons. But I go to the client, and it's, I think, New Year's Eve or about that time. I decided to go to the Bremen Hauptbahnhof train station because they'll sell an English language newspaper. I want to get an English language newspaper. I buy the paper. I think I bought a coat, and then there were some GIs setting off firecrackers on people's feet and laughing. I think they got something with great. And I decided I needed to be quiet in their presence. I go back out the parking space, and it sounds like I'm running over a bicycle. I look and I don't see anything. I get back in, and there's a guy going, my axle had broken. Look, it didn't break on the allotment. It broke in the parking lot.
Lucky.
Yeah. When we moved to Frankfurt a few years later, one of the requirements was we had to have an Audi dealership within walking.
And shortly thereafter,
We gave it away.
and we bought a bowl of them.
American Women's Club. This is hers for sure.
So, while David was.
No, it was a godsend. When we found the Women's Club, it was a godsend.
Grace. When David was going back and forth for residency permits and permits, he met another American that was in the process of checking out. And he was saying, you know, wife's having a little difficulties. And he's like, oh, my wife was involved in the American Women's Club. I'll have her call your wife and she'll take her shopping, whatever. So it's an international group. And they have, some of the locations have their own buildings or houses. Other times they just moved locations. So this woman took me shopping because I was trying to decipher. So the flour I bought wasn't flour. It was what you used to thicken gravy. But it had the same German word for flour. You have different things. And then they had this wonderful booklet, which I did not find beforehand, called Bloom Where You're Planted. And that was like the Bible for all the expats in it. Because it would give you different words, like what one thing is English versus German, where to shop, what to look for. Basically how to cope with your everyday life. And saying bloom where you're planted became like a mantra wherever we went, because you try and bloom wherever you end up. Because what people don't understand when you're moving with families, the children are the mirrors of the mother. If the mother's not adjusting and having a hard time, the kids will. And the mothers have to bloom where they're planted quickly because they're the bedrock of the family. And they have to handle a lot more things than the husbands. I probably still keep in touch with a few of my American women friends, and they're all over the world. It's not just Americans.
Yeah, one of the observations we both came to was, if you go overseas, you can't go home in the first 6 months. You probably shouldn't go home in the first 9 months, because there's going to be a period of adjustment that you've got to work through. And we met a couple. He had a 5-year assignment with Bayer out of Pittsburgh, Miles. That had to be a career-defining opportunity. And she decided after 3 months she was just going to go back home and visit the family and take the kids. She never came back. And we would tell people, you know, you should do that. And I'd also tell people, think of things as not right and wrong. They're just different. And if you find out and understand why they're different, it's a pretty good chance you're going to agree with what they thought about.
And that the first 6 months, everything's aggravating you. Plus, you're sicker than you've ever been in your life. You know, little things, but it just annoys you. Then one morning, about 6 months, almost to the day you wake up, everything's fine. And nothing has changed. It's just that you're accepting it. And I tell people that, and most people that are coming over think I'm crazy. And then he had a partner going over to Switzerland, and his wife didn't want to come, and I spent I don't know how many hours on the phone with her. She came over. I told her, once you come, you won't want to go back. And then he decided to go back early, and then she almost divorced him so she could stay in Switzerland. One thing that we did learn very quickly, yes, Germans are extremely punctual. If you're inviting people to dinner and you say, come at 7, they are outside of your house at 10 or 7, watching their watches, and they will be at the door at 7 o'clock. When people say they're coming at 1 o'clock, they've been there at 1 o'clock. And then you come back to the U.S. and you're there waiting 6 hours for the cable guy. So there are adjustments on both sides, and it takes time.
Well, then there was Puerto Rico. That was even different.
Yeah, that was different.
So I thought one of the next things that's maybe a little bit of fun is language. So I used to go, you know, the first summer I went back to Boston, I would tell people, I discovered we're all situations rude. And they go like, what do you mean? I said, well, my business German is really good, but my wife's medical German is much better than that. And I said, you and I could go a half mile from our office in downtown Boston, listen to English, and you wouldn't understand what they're talking about. They thought I was crazy. They said, yeah, let's go to the upper level math class at MIT. My guess is we won't understand what they're talking about, and they're going to be speaking English. Yeah, that's really kind of what it is. The German language is very specific. The UK British language is very specific. Our language, not so much. Did I hear that right? Senior partner for all of northern Germany. Going to take me to meet the American consulate. I was 100% sure he said, we'll meet in the office. He was 100% sure he said we'd meet at the consulate. It's a little exciting for about an hour. You start talking and you're not sure if you've heard something correctly. You got to question around the boundaries of things to make sure that you kind of got a better chance of getting to it. You don't know how much they know or understand. A lot of Germans are very good at conversational English, but once you go beyond that, they don't have a clue, but they might not let you know that they don't have a clue. Is translation necessary? When I started and somebody wanted me to translate something, I was in my dictionary out and going kind of word for word, and it was frustrating. It was really slow. And eventually I gave up and I said, it's ridiculous. I can get the gist of what's being said if I just read it, and then I just write it in English where the other person can understand it. It's not precise, but what I'm trying to do is communicate and convey, and if I can convey what they need to understand, we're okay.
Now, one thing about language, especially in northern Germany, they want to be perfect in English so they will talk to you. They would drive. I had an American friend who didn't speak German. Her next door neighbor would only speak German to her. And right after, day before she was leaving to go back to the United States, she found that they never spoke perfect English, which I already knew because we were at her daughter's birthday party, and I could understand. She was understanding every word of English. And, and people are just, especially Northerners, don't want to show a deficiency. So they're not willing to take a risk. One of our neighbors 2 doors down, they were going to, I think, one of the Caribbean islands, but he needed to work on his English. Instead of asking me to help him, he struggled on his own. And I was like, so why didn't he come 2 doors down and ask me? I'm not terrible, but it's the attitude.
Well, and there's a formality. Germans are probably a lot more formal than Americans. And Franny's probably seen that a little bit. And I imagine, I know some people in the audience, unfortunately. But, in Germany, it's Sie versus du. And I used to get in a lot of trouble because I would see people when they wanted me to do them. And I said, look, it's just me. I mean do, but I can't get it to come out right. So just accept it. There's a hierarchy, there's a respectfulness, which I kind of like. I mean, that was enjoyable. And we had a senior tax partner who was German, and his wife was English. And every time I spoke to him in German, he would respond in English. It got to me. So about 18 months in, I stuck my head in, said something to him in German, and he responded in German, and I was like, I made some progress. So that was the day. I was very excited. Okay. So I was 8 years in to public accounting. 10 to 12 years is when you make partner. So I was getting a little bored because most of my clients, I'd been on them since year one. And I wanted to do some new and different things. And I'd never intended to stay in public accounting, but I liked teaching people and mentoring and that sort of thing. So the people side I enjoyed. So thinking about going to Germany, it was like, okay, I know how to do my job. I'm going to wake up though in a different language. So that should be kind of interesting, a little bit different. And I took a couple weeks of Berlitz, and I never caught up to where I was in U.S., which is kind of her point on perfect grammar. I could not get perfect grammar in English, so I wasn't going to get there in German. So I went out to my first client, and they had me slotted kind of as somebody with a year and a half's worth of experience. And that's okay. It's a team probably about 8 to 10, 12 people. They gave us taxes to do, which was kind of interesting because it's like, okay, taxes are normally pretty specific. Eventually I said, okay, government wants to take money from companies. How might they do that? And I found out that the German system is very much like the U.S. system, just different words. And I got to meet the tax director, and I got along okay. And then years later in my career, he was the tax director in Switzerland, responsible for all of Europe. He wouldn't talk to the tax partner, but he would talk to me. And so that was cool. But what I had to do was fit in. But then it was interesting when we got to year end, so January, so just maybe a month in, the guy who was to really lead the teams and handle all the reporting to the U.S. never showed up. It turned out he had a second job as CFO of a technology company that had gone bankrupt. And that was serious. So that's where he had his priority, but we didn't know that. He just didn't show up. My team is getting pretty excited, and I can hear that and understand that. So eventually I kind of raised my hand and said, I might be able to help you a little bit. So I ended up taking over the lead. Did that on my next engagement, and then eventually there was a meeting for all the partners in Northern Germany, and they said, I found out I was the second youngest person in the entire region, which was fascinating. And they ended up saying, what do you want to do? Which was wonderful for me because I could become essentially my own boss. And so I want to do training. I want to teach. I want to meet people in every office that I can. I want to help out. I want to problem solve. So it created opportunities for the rest of my career. You're wanting pictures again. We'll get to some.
That's our youngest, Will.
He's visiting grandma, and I think grandma was paying too much attention to the dog. So I actually did a controllers conference in Switzerland for Kraft Jacobs-Suchard, which is about a $10 billion organization. And 2 years earlier, I had done the due diligence in Germany. And it was in the summer, and none of the partners wanted to be involved because they didn't want to disrupt their vacation. So we took a manager and told the client he was a partner. That was interesting because a year later, the partners wanted the job back. And he said, it's his. We can't change it. But I had to have a badge to work that summer. So I went to the local train station in Hamburg, and I got a picture with me and my older son, our heads next to each other. And everybody was and what have you. I go to do the controllers conference a couple years later, and I said, look, I've changed. I'm older, I'm here, I got a new son. People might remember me from Germany, the picture of my son, and I'm so cute. Here's my new son. The Germans died like my son's in Uber. Everybody else is just working here, can see what their choice is.
So, did anyone watch the series Scrubs? The episode with the baby in a carrier,
Baby in a cage.
baby in a cage, is based on this picture. My mother-in-law had it on her refrigerator, and her cousin or cousin's daughter, Kate, who was an associate producer on Scrubs, saw the picture and then wrote that episode with that picture in mind.
I think it bombed. Memories and learnings. I think we touched on a lot of this. The second one's kind of interesting. Every foreigner in Germany, no matter what country they came through, had the same experiences. And they had the same language. We could talk to each other without a problem in German because we all made the same mistakes. And you meet people later in life, and if you've had the expat experience, you can talk with each other. Everybody else, it kind of glaze over a little bit, and that's probably happening right now. Another thing with all the issues that we came across, once you start solving the issues and you feel like you can solve one, you really come away with a confidence that, you can throw me somewhere and I'm going to come out floating. And kind of how interconnected we all are. Kim kind of laughs just about every trip I go on.
You know some.
I know somebody. I have somebody in common. I don't know who Mr. Beck is yet, if he's here, but there he is in the back. he worked with a gentleman who was a legend in my Detroit office, a Secret Life ran, Rick Snyder. And we have some members of sister cities. There's 2 Lenny libraries in Puerto Rico. Mine was on the board of one, I was on the board of the other. We knew a whole bunch of people in common. Please ask some questions. This is the last picture of the caged boy.
No, that's Dave's. That was Dave. No, this is Dave.
Will yesterday agreed it was him going to show and tell, first grade or kindergarten, and it was the last time he wore that outfit because he got laughed at. I am probably wrong.
They didn't look similar.
Answer, David.
So, Walfeld is one of the interesting things. We're there. Hamburg is the media capital of all of Germany, at least at that time. Television cameras are there, what have you. Walfeld. They send camera crews to the Reeperbahn, which is the red light district. That's where the Beatles began. There are places there. The story was the strongest army in the world was the police department in the Reeperbahn. Pretty edgy area. 56 minutes for the first East German car to arrive. And then the next day there's stories about dad babysitting the kid while mom went inside, and were in the alterations. And then going back, all the abandoned Traubeys in dumpsters, because they essentially were lawnmower engines, and they ran on a gas oil slurry that wasn't available in the West. So they ended up kind of running out, and I guess would hitchhike with other people. At that time, my mom was visiting. We were going to go to Lubeck, and if you were in East Germany going to West Germany, you got Lubeck, 50 Deutschmarks. Lubeck has a population of 125,000 people. They were expecting that Saturday 375,000. We said, okay, we're going to take a train down the Hindenburger Heide, which would be kind of like, kind of city. It's very farm-oriented, agrarian area. We go down and get on, and my mom's there wearing a white vinyl card cup.
It's November.
No German would wear a white vinyl card cup. So all the little kids figured out, okay, she's got to be from the East. So they're giving her bananas as fruit because she was in East Germany. And then we get down to Bloomberg's, and my mom wants to go shopping. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina. And she got mobbed by the East Germans who were just, because my mom could shop. In any language, she could shop. Well, she looked like she knew what she did. That she wore the white clothes. So you'd have about 20 people mobbed her. Driving back, she got real quiet because we had to wait into the East. It might have been 2 weeks later.
It was a later trip.
Yes. But we're going through, and she's very quiet, which is not Ramon safe. And she said, this reminds me of the drive to Baltimore in the 30s.
We were driving around Weimar.
Yeah, we're Weimar Republic, which had been in the East.
Yeah.
But, right after the wall fell, the first thing this was the Latin penny. And how dull East Germany was compared to West Germany. We went to Potsdam, just outside of Berlin, and probably a year or two later, and if you went down to parade streets, were paved. Side streets, no, we could still see all the bullet holes. And you go to Ingve Linden in Berlin, it's very, very famous street. Probably every fourth building in 91 had been rebuilt. Today, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Reimer Dollar was a partner of mine. He was older. He was kind of a mentor of mine. His wife, very elegant woman, told us how he cried hours upon hours. And we found out he'd grown up in the East, escaped to the West, probably when he was about 22, at the Repeat University. Had a brother who was a nuclear physicist in the East. So his brother was never allowed and this family was never allowed to come to the West. They could go to the East periodically. And she talked about going to the East and having one of the nieces, 10 years old, come up and ask whether or not they had running water. They had courtlets in the house. Because we understand you can totally go evident from something. And when wall fell, within months, they had the family over to visit and could see. Just before I went to Hamburg for the first time, we had a partner. He had been a mentor for me. We chatted and said, this state, there won't be a unification in our lifetime. And the first week I went to my client, it's in the run up to Christmas, every single person went and bought a pallet of coffee. We sent to relatives and needs a pallet. I called him up on Monday and I said, I think it was wrong. I can't imagine similar circumstances, a U.S. family buying a pallet of coffee for the cousin. And you can just what? I think people are a lot closer than you think. So it's very fascinating to be there at that point in time. It's been fascinating to go back and to see how it changes each time. Initially it was very dull and what have you. Went back a couple of years later to Berlin, and all the small shops had disappeared. All the Western chains were in there. And then now it's just kind of like any other robust city. I'll go quickly on this one. So Jackie's already talked about how punctual people are and mentioned how much older everybody was. At least back then we had, if you were going to go to university, we probably had about 13 years of high school. Then you would go to university because you got accepted, and accepted meaning you had the opportunity to go to university. They might assign where you was going to go and which program you was going to be in. It's not quite like the U.S. process. Tuition basically free, but being aboard you responsible. It's pretty expensive, can be pretty expensive. The people generally very well, at least the people I dealt with as an auditor, very well educated, very competent, probably more competent than U.S. counterparts. I'd go into buildings, and there might be 20 doors down a hallway, 10 on each side. Every single door is swept. If you've got to go talk to somebody, you got to count how many doors down you got to go to knock because you're not sure where they are. You go inside, be a secretary, 4 doors, all closed. They think having an open door, this what I was told, open door is septic because it creates noise, distraction. And we'll see the opposite completely. Generally, they're incredibly confident people. And the analogy I ended up with in my mind was the series of building work. In the U.S., you always have oversight. Everybody flipping over somebody's shoulder. It's always a boss. Not so much there. You do your job, and then you end it up. It works really well. Unless you have a bad apple. This bad apple doesn't get found for a while. And when it gets found, nobody told me. We'll hear that sometimes. Read about Garland, but it's the cat key too. They trust me, people. I was excited. January 1st, I would get the plan every single day for the next year. That's never happened in Boston. You hear a lot about efficiency, not so much about effectiveness back then. And the journalists entitled to fresh air, open window, that sort of thing. Very, very different, I think. But it was nice because the buildings have character for the most part. All tend to be designed by architects. They don't like the U.S. style cookie cutter sort of thing. That's pretty cool. I had a project one day at the building that was originally built for life at the Chin Cutting. That was probably built in the 20s. Yeah, that was just gorgeous. This was a gorgeous building. Lunch is the big meal. Then such to that. And if you do go to a factory and order lunch, and all your colleagues look at you like look amazing, you probably shouldn't eat it. I got lung. On bike, that. Okay. Just a little bit interesting. The Germans, if we had an accounting issue, they'd get their commentaries, they'd get their books, they'd study it for a couple of days, then they might ask a question. We would call somebody up on the phone and say, you ever seen something like this before? Nah, I think so-and-so has. So then you call so-and-so, and so-and-so goes, yeah, I've seen it, but Harry and Gene, they're the experts. Call them. When you call them, and they go, oh, that's not the question. The question really is. So that was fascinating for me to see, and that ended up helping me a bit in my career because they would come to me with issues and what have you, and ask me to go find where the answers were, who they could talk to. Thank you. I'm done. Sorry.
Guten Tag. Glad to be here. And I thought back to the first time this group, I got together with you several years ago. And that was the time when you had flags for both groups, and I still have the flag you gave me, and I appreciate it. I was looking forward to coming over and visiting with you on one of my trips, and along came COVID and a few other things, so it didn't work out. But I'm sure glad to be here, and our sister cities are back together again. I was with a little company called EBMA. We call them IBM here, and that gave me my first. I'm a hillbilly born in Kentucky. I didn't think I'd see the ocean of my life, and things worked out good for me. So I joined this company as a startup, almost a startup in the computer industry, IBM, and it was amazing because along came about halfway in my career with them. I went through four or five CEOs there, and Frank Carey said, "You know what? We're not really international, are we, Bob?" And I said, "No, sir, we're not." And a lot of people wouldn't admit that, but the headquarters in Armonk, New York, I mean, I knew almost everybody now because I was head of HR. I said, "We're not running it right." And he said, "That I agree with that." He said, "We're also not running the business right." So he said, "I want to make some major changes." And one of them was that in the countries, in the U.S., big systems and small, medium systems and typewriters, which was very successful with electric ball and all that stuff, if you ever had any, they were in different divisions, and they were doing really well. But take a company like Germany, they were selling a lot of big systems, but not much else. And so we figured it out, and it wasn't just Germany, it was all the major countries. And it's because, hey, it took a year to sell one of those big computers, but it was a lot of money. So he decided we ought to do what we did in the U.S., but a different way, and that's split out the medium and small systems and the typewriter divisions in the countries and have them report into a new division in White Plains, New York. Well, it's going to be Armonk, but I moved it to White Plains, New York. And we all thought about it, talked about it, and said, you know what, we're going to do it worldwide, and at least in the biggest countries on all the continents. And so, Bob, we want you to do it. Well, I at least had a passport, and so my boss said, "Where do you want to move where do you want the headquarters? Let's get it out of here, Williamson County. It's too many IBM people." So we looked around, and to move them down to another state means I have to recruit all the people, especially the high-level people, which cost me the most, because IBM stood for I've been moved, and I moved 5,000 people a year. And because we were moving them so often and growing so fast, I moved a few people 3 times in 1 year. And what that meant, and I don't mean this to be chauvinistic, but what that meant is the wife could have anything she wanted. And literally, I've got cases where I moved from New York to Minneapolis, and then he was there, and then we got into the typewriter the copier business, compete with Xerox, and we shouldn't have. We didn't know that business that well, but they made the plant in Boulder, Colorado that we had built. So I had to get the executive that we knew, the only one that could pull it off. I just moved him to Minnesota. And so I told my boss, I said, look, I got an open card, don't I, to get this done? He said, yes, sir, go do it. So I flew up, I knew his wife, Sally, and I said to Sally, you got your house all settled now, all new drapes, all the new stuff? Yeah. Guess what? We need your hubby in Boulder, Colorado. She said, what? I said, you can have anything you want. All new appliances, all new, whatever you want, you have it. They did it. So anyway, that was some of the rare exceptions. Well, now I got to deal with international headquarters, because I knew it would take too long to take Armonk, New York, which was the major headquarters, the founding headquarters. I'd say it was 90% Americans. And to make those changes quickly, I couldn't do it. But now I had a blank check to start a new business group we called it GBGI, General Business Group International, because we'd taken the ones in the U.S. that were independent, we called them General Business Group. So the boss said, let's do it. And I said, my goal is to get 50% of the people that come over for 2 or 3 year assignments to be international people in our headquarters. Not cheap, because we paid them well to, come over and all those sorts of things. And long story short, we did it. And I heard some of the discussions here, and one of the things I started in that headquarters development, I used actually when I went to Bank America and Abbott Laboratories, and then out in the middle of South Dakota, the Bill Gateway Computer Company. How do you get people to move? And so what I did was I had people that we already had either there, or when I hired them, I knew they could be a salesperson. So I asked the spouses, actually, because the employees were flying all over the world and were going to get started, is that, will you be a hostess? And I will pay you a small fee. I'll pay you for gasoline, and I'll pay you for taking people to dinner, lunch. And so when we get another couple coming in, I would like you to take them around the town they're going to live in, show them where the butcher shop is, show them where you go, the dry cleaners, all that stuff. Take them to lunch, take them to the schools if they're going to use those schools. And they all use those schools except one. They weren't allowed, the French. I learned that I didn't know that before. The French had to send their school to a French school, or they wouldn't give them credit for a grade. So Dominic, that I brought over from Paris, he had to live in New York City, and of course we're up near White Plains, New York. And so it worked out because I gave him some assistance and that sort of thing. But hey, to give you an example, it works the same way in trying to get people to come to South Dakota. So I hired a guy that I knew in compensation out of New Jersey, and I knew him, Ed McDonald, and he came out. So then his wife agreed to be a hostess in South Dakota. And first thing they did was show them the schools, show them the butcher shops, show them all that stuff, brought them in. And after we really staffed that whole thing, we went from nothing to a worldwide company as well. And they came to me and said, Bob, can we form some clubs? These are the spouses. And I said, yeah, what do you want to do? He said, well, we'd like to have some different clubs. We found a lot of people moving in here. Some want to play bridge, some want to do something else, one want to do hook rugs, whatever. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Form your clubs. And they did. And it was so cool. And they got together. Oh, sorry. And so it didn't cost a lot of money. But people made it, they got it through and happy, and it's got to be done both ways. So when I sent people over to Dieter Brandt in Germany, I said, don't just let them show up. Especially the employee is mostly because they all can speak English, or they wouldn't have been probably going on an international assignment, or they take lessons and adapt to it. But I said it's the family. So I had a guy who he was in Lexington, Kentucky, where we made all the typewriters at that time for the U.S. I said, you look like you can go in places. You want international experience? And he said, yeah. He says, I understand there's an opening in Brazil. Can I go? I said, let's talk about it. Will your family go? Because you've got a son who's a junior in high school. And he said, well, yeah, I'll talk to him. So he talked to him. Said his wife said no. He's on the football team. He's got a good job in what he wants to do. And so we'll wait till he finishes junior year and his senior year. Then we'll have you. Then we'll consider coming down. I told him, sorry, but you don't get the job. Why? They said they'd come down. Yeah, a year and a half later. I said, the girls on the beach at Ipanema, they don't wear anything. And I said, I'm not going to take that chance. I'm sorry, you can't. And if you've ever been anywhere, it is. It's Band-Aid and a cork. But so anyway, I just wanted to add that in. I didn't have it in my notes, but I heard you talking about it. If you work at it, they go good. I've had very few problems that way, and I've had people from all over. People from Japan, they adapted, and because they had support structures to get going easily, and once they get here, they enjoy it. And so we didn't have a lot of high turnovers. Anyway, I spent my early trips in Germany because it was one of the biggest businesses we had to start. Germany was booming. We couldn't make the computers fast enough, and so. Oh, by the way, on the side note, I had 5,000 international assignees, and when I got done, 50% of them were non-U.S. citizens, and I really felt good about that. So, and we kept them 2 and 3 years, depending on the job, and to come back. So I spent the early time with a lot of IBM people in Germany, and with a name like Beck, I couldn't get any rights on Beck's beer, but they accepted me pretty well. So in headquarters, they moved it, and it's now in a place called Kremenetz, but most of it was in other places. And then we had research labs, several places. The main one was in Berblingen. We had one in Sindelfingen, but I think closed that one. And Berblingen is now even adjusted to being an AI experts. And then and we had factories up in Berlin. And I'm going to tell you a little excitement about that, because that's when the Berlin Wall was up, and it wasn't easy to get in, and you only had 3 airlines you could use. And I'll tell you something a little about that. But by 1975, and we kicked it off in 1967. By 1975, we had $2 billion in business in Germany alone for computer systems. So we were growing fast. I thought I'd tell you a few of the fun stories of being an American and learning from Kentucky, going into most of the countries around the world, at least the major ones. So one is, I'll start with Germany. My head of HR there was Dieter Brandt, became a very close friends. And I'm coming over and visiting, and he asked me, do you want me to set up any other visits? And I said, yeah, I'd like to go and visit the Mercedes-Benz plant. And by the way, in a computerized computer plant, you can't have spots of anything, and especially when you're making chips. And so I always talked about an IBM, you can eat off the floor, literally. And so I said, I want to see the Mercedes-Benz plant. So he said, okay, he set it up. So the Mercedes-Benz guy came over. I got to meet him, and we took him on a tour of one of our factories. He was very impressed. He said, you want to go do mine tomorrow? And I said, sure, let's do yours tomorrow. I went through it, and I was amazed. I was just amazed that you could eat off the floor there, and that's a car manufacturing plant. But we got to the end, and I'm kind of a gregarious, friendly guy. Just talk about stuff. I don't like to cause any problems on rules or regulations. But we got to the end. He said, "What do you think, Bob?" I said, "That Mercedes 500 SL, that's one of my dream and goals." And I said, I'm going to work to get one. And so I said, but he said, well, can I get you anything? And I said, could I buy one of those hood ornaments? And I think Dieter was going to die. He goes over to a box full of them, comes over and says, you can't buy this one, but I can give it to you. I said, that's my start. We left the factory, and Dieter says, oh, Bob, you shouldn't have asked for that. I said, didn't I asked to buy it? He said, well, okay. I said, well, that's fine. So at the end of the tour, we did the car talk, and I got my hood ornament, and I still have a day. I put it home in a wooden block, and it's still there as a dream because I'm really a Chevy guy. So I have a 54 Corvette, a 57 Fuel Yvette, and a 2008 Vet because we make them in Kentucky. Almost no one from the U.S. was going to Berlin because it was hard to get in and out. There were 3 airlines, Pan Am, British, and French Air, and that was in the agreement. And you had to go through 2 different checkpoint Charlies, one when you landed it, and Frankfurt. You got to land in Frankfurt, but then you had to go through another checkpoint to get through to Berlin. And so I did it, and I met those people over there, and they were so excited to see me. They make typewriters, and darn good ones. And so I decided to spend a few days there with them because it was a real challenge to get in and out as well. So I was suggested to go over to East Berlin while you're here. And of course I'd already gone at nighttime, all the honky tonks that we call them here, but really fun places to go in West Berlin. It was fantastic. Movies have been made there and so on. But I went over and I got to Checkpoint Charlie and I had my camera. And they had told me, Bob, do not touch your camera. Those tall buildings over there are having, spies there watching. And if you touch your camera, they'll take it. They don't care. They'll just take it. And they, of course, ran mirrors underneath the bus and all that stuff. So I did what they said. I always follow the rules. And I got into downtown. I was blown away. If you've ever been to West Berlin with all the lights and the places and all these things and neon signs and everything else, there wasn't one neon sign. There wasn't any store I saw open. I didn't see cars on the street. It blew my mind. I mean, how different it was. I met a few people that spoke English, and I just chatted about different things, and I said, so do you have TV? You don't get TV, or do you get it? Oh, he said, we had FM aerials, and we put them in the attic, and we can get some of the West Berlin TV stations, but they don't know it, so we won't let them know it. So anyway, I went on a Sunday as well, and I'm walking around looking at stuff and I can take pictures once I'm inside, so I did. And I heard an Oom-Pah-Bah band. Well, that got to my heart. And I'm looking, I'm following, and it's a park. It's a park, and people are out there on Sunday having their their picnics and so on. So I'm standing there and saying, I wonder if I can take a picture, because some people don't like that. I've had some places in some countries you don't take their picture at all, ever. And so I'm standing there, and I'm thinking about taking a picture. And there's a group of family over here pretty close, and they see me, and I could see that they're pointing and talking about me. So I don't know if it's good or bad. So a guy gets up and comes over, and he's pretty good English. And he says, hi. I said, hi. And So he said, you want to come in? I said, yeah. And I said, can I take pictures here? He said, sure, yeah. Come on over and eat with us. And I had food and a beer with him, and it was just so much fun. And so that's when I learned a lot of things that were going on that people, they hated how they were being treated by the government, but they had hope. They had still hope. And they talked about sending packages back and forth to their loved ones on the other side. And sometimes when it comes in, it was said medicine and stuff on it, but it was really instant soup and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. So I enjoyed that, and I learned a lot by being with them. Let's see. Oh, in addition to going there, I got to know the town pretty well. So when I started my division, my division, international division, I had people from each of the major continents. I brought them to New York, my HR managers, and I got the first dinner at the top of the World Trade Towers, windows on the world. So when I lost an employee at a different company, I was in Merit City, I was there, lost an employee. There was supposed to be 5 there that morning for a meeting. Fortunately, 4 of them were late for picking up glasses and so on. So that whole thing had a big connection to me. So I told the HR managers, now, this was because I wanted you to get to know the headquarters and be here. They'd never been there, a lot of them. And but then I'm going to let you host the meetings in your country, one at a time. So the first one is my HR manager in the Netherlands said, I want it. I think it was Ari Sigmund. And so, so I want to have, because someone like Peter Gregory in Australia, they don't know a lot about what's going on in the world because they're upside down, right? And so I said, we're going to do some entertainment in each one of them and unique to your country. So the one we did in Netherlands, Holland, Netherlands, we got the Van Gogh Museum, and we had a whole dinner in there and people playing music and walking around, and they loved it. They loved it. So now to shorten it, now Dieter Brandt in Germany wanted to do the next one. So I said, okay. So we came, and they came from all over the world, come in, and it was about 16 or 17 or 18. And I started working with his secretary, getting it up. I went over early. And I said, for entertainment, now that I've been to Berlin, the Berlin Opera's open. And let's take them to the Berlin Opera. It'll be a little pain to get there, but let's do it. And a couple of my staff said, are you kidding me? Peter Gregory going to the opera? I said, yep. And so we did it. We got there, and we stayed at the same hotel I stayed at. And they had a great time with it. And I had them also take a half a day off and go to East Germany, see the differences. But then when we went to the opera, Heidi Kunzendorf was my Dieter's secretary. And I said, I want you to take this little speech I've got for the team and put it in German and rehearse me some. So she rehearsed me. So I gave the welcome in German, and I gave them the English on their desk. But I did that. So then when I said, I want to take, I said to Dieter, I want to take Heidi to, she'd been working like crazy for me. I said, I want her to come to the opera house too, get it all decked up and so on. No, you don't have to do that. And I found that some of the people in the headquarters didn't even know the last name of their secretaries. So I said, no, she's coming. So she did. So she wore a beautiful red gown. I'll never forget it. At the intermission, she said, you want something to drink? I'll go get it. And I said, no, what do you want to drink? I'll go get it. So she said, well, no, I can do it. I said, no, I'm going to do it. So she said, okay, I'll have a champagne. So I said, okay. So I went up and I ordered Ein champagne and Ein dry sherry. So I wanted a dry sherry. So he puts up a glass of champagne and 3 sherries. I said, well, no, ein Champagne, ein Dry Sherry. Yeah. So Heidi comes up and says, what's the matter, Bob? I said, I ordered ein Dry Sherry, one champagne for you. She said, Bob, you haven't learned our numbering system. Ein Spice Dry, you ordered 3 sherries. So anyway, I love things like that. So let's see.
I heard you were a funny guy.
What, you want me to stop?
We have these two coming up to talk about travel and cars.
Okay.
And we are on a little bit of a time crunch.
Okay, all right. Well, that's
And
good.
I thought it ending on a joke was wonderful.
Okay,
I thought
great.
That was,
Super.
we heard Bob back there. Thank you.
What?
The library closes. I wish it stayed
Oh,
open all night.
okay.
Like a honky tonk.
Oops.
Thank you, Mr. Beck.
Let me put this in my pocket. I could be low.
Okay. I am going to pull up. Welcome to Franny and Taylor. I'll let you give each other's bios. How about that? While I pull up your, and if you come, they have just moved to Franklin. Right. Yeah, I should probably stop multitasking right up and leave.
Should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah,
Well, hi, buddy.
come on up.
I'll go over here. There we go.
Since it doesn't work, so you get to do it old-fashioned.
Perfect. No, thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Franny. This is my husband Taylor. Like Kim briefly mentioned, we just moved to Franklin about 2 months ago. So I go by Franny, and my last name is now Gum, 'cause that's Taylor's last name. But my original name is Franziska Hilda Elfriede Bate. So it's very German. We moved here 2 months ago. We grew up and met and studied in California, but I was born in Germany. I was born in Germany in a little town called Bad Soden. So it's funny how I was born in Bad Soden, in the hospital right there. My parents, took me they lived in the neighboring the next town. And now I'm here in Franklin and their sister city. So that's kind of funny. I grew up going back and forth to Germany, so I spent every single summer, the entire summer, right there in Bad Soden in the next town over called Königstein, if any of you have ever been there. But I grew up every summer, every Christmas, my family was there because my grandparents were still there, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. My parents' whole life had been there, so they moved when I was 2, and I have a few brothers who came with me. Let's see. Yeah, I grew up my mom lives in California in Santa Barbara. She's the president of the German American Club there. So I have a heart for these kind of cultural exchange organizations, even if they're small. I think they're really important. It's really important for me to maintain my German culture, and I grew up speaking German. I speak German. That's one of the reasons that motivated my husband and I actually last year to move to Germany full-time for 1 year. We knew we were coming to Franklin, but the opportunity presented itself to spend 1 year in Germany. I wanted Taylor to learn German, so he was willing and gracious enough to come out there and learn German. And now we're here. And we're excited to be part of this organization. I immediately got in touch. When I found out that it's a partner city between Franklin and Bad Soden, I was like, I have to somehow be at home. So, anyway, happy to be here.
Yeah, we're super happy to be here. And so when I was thinking of things that I could talk about for today, I love cars. I love Formula One car racing. And I think cars are a big part of German culture and their history. So I thought, what better that I could talk about and share some of my experience. So when thinking of transportation in Germany, it is so much better there in terms of the public transportation system with trains and buses even. Many people don't even actually have a car, or families won't have 2 cars, whereas here, I think it might be impossible if you didn't have a car, especially if you live, more rural in the countryside or whatever. And it's funny, there, the Deutsche Bahn, like kind of the public railway system and bus system, it's a total joke. Everybody, because it's late sometimes or whatever. To me, as an American moving there, I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. It was 50 euros a month, so close to $50 a month for an unlimited pass, and you could take trains anywhere in Germany, not the bullet super fast ones, But anything else, it was incredible. But it's just funny that there, Germans are like, oh, the Swiss, it's so much better in Switzerland because they'll apologize if it's 1 minute late. But Germany, it is late sometimes, but it's so much better there than here. Yeah.
The 50 euros include the local regional trains?
Yes.
Isn't
Yeah.
too?
Yeah.
And Deutsche Bahn?
Yeah, it's called the Deutschland ticket. Yeah. Yeah, so not with the high-speed ones that go, I don't know, 300 kilometers an hour, but with the slower ones. So that's what I would take into Frankfurt to go to university every day, and I thought it was an incredible deal. So cars, once again, I love cars. So thinking about cars specifically, there are, a lot of really famous car manufacturers that come from all over Germany. We have Volkswagen, Mercedes, Porsche, BMW, Audi, just to name kind of the most famous ones. I'm just curious, by a show of hands, who has owned a German car in your lifetime? Where do you go? Okay, maybe a little under half the room. If we were in Germany right now, everybody would raise both their hands because they probably have multiple German cars in their lifetime. That's just, everybody really owns one of these brands. Here, I think we have a real diverse, yes,
We have a Volkswagen plant in Tennessee.
that's awesome. That's super cool. So maybe more people will start buying them here. But yeah, they're very proud of their cars and the tradition, and almost every car that we would see there is a German brand. There were very few Japanese brands or American brands. It's also interesting living in Tennessee. There's trucks everywhere. We saw like 2 trucks in the whole year we lived there. There's just no trucks because the roads are so narrow. You couldn't really fit trucks on several of the roads. So then you think of big Ford F-150s. That would be crazy to Germans to drive there. By another show of hands, who can drive stick shift here? I think probably most people. Yeah, just about everybody can drive stick shift. There, you have to know how to drive stick shift to rent a car, or, even new cars that they make there sometimes are still stick shift.
But people our age here cannot drive.
Yeah, I don't have none of my friends. Yeah.
Particular group of people.
Yeah,
who
my
can drive
parents can drive stick shift, but no one, we're 26, none of my friends can drive stick shift. And moving there, I didn't know how to drive stick shift. But the car we drove there was Franny's grandmother's 1993 diesel Mercedes 190 series. That was awesome. It was super cool, but that's how I had to learn. It has no anti-rollback, anti-stall features or whatever, so it was awesome to learn, but that's another interesting thing. German engineering, as kind of we heard earlier from Jacqueline and David's Audi, German engineering can often mean over-engineering. They are always kind of pushing the boundaries of, okay, what can we do with cars? They are really looking to have a revolution in the car business, or if you think of brands maybe like Honda or Toyota, it's much more evolution. Let's take what we have and just make it better and better, whereas these brands are trying to come up with super fancy things in their cars all the time. One of my highlights of my entire time living in Germany was I got to go to the Porsche factory, similar how Robert got to go to the Mercedes factory. And so this is in Zuffenhausen, which is right near Stuttgart, and it was awesome. There's just Porsches driving everywhere, obviously, new ones that they're testing. And then in this building specifically is where they make the Porsche GT3s, so the super fancy, nice Porsches. And it was just an incredible experience. It was 10 euros, and I booked the tickets 7 months in advance, was how long it took to just get a ticket. And it wasn't expensive, but they just had very few kind of options and opportunities to go to see the factory.
That's maybe a good example of how a lot of things in Germany work. It's only 10 euros, but you have to wait 7 months
Yeah.
to get it. So
Yeah.
things are subsidized and really accessible, but sometimes the bureaucratic things can really delay things for a while.
Exactly. And the Autobahn is something that I wouldn't talk about because I feel like everybody has always heard of that. And when we moved there, all my friends were like, oh, are you going to go on the Autobahn, this one place where you have no speed limit? And I actually thought that moving there, I was like, oh yeah, well, Franny, where's the place where you can drive with no speed limit? But actually, the Autobahn just is the German word for freeway. So when you think of freeway, there's many freeways in Germany, and certain stretches will have this sign, which means it's like a de-restricted zone. So there's no speed limit. So you can go 250 kilometers per hour, and cars have driven past us, and our car shakes because they pass you so fast. And in our 1993 diesel, we never went in the left lane once because at 60 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, it felt like it would blow up. It just shook pretty intensely. So that was scary. So there are sections of the Autobahn, but there are a lot of them. It's not just one kind of freeway where you can drive fast. And Germans do drive really fast, but they're good drivers. And so quickly, we actually got to go to this first racetrack, the Nürburgring. It's one of the most famous racetracks in the world in Germany. It's called the Green Hell. It's kind of its nickname. This is a picture of it. As you can see, there's nothing like it really that I know in the world. It's 24 kilometers long in the forest. and just unbelievable elevation change and everything. So it's a super famous racetrack that is still there. Both of these tracks are historic Formula One tracks. When Michael Schumacher used to race, you know, it was really big and popular in Germany. Now there's only one German driver who's not good, so it's a little bit less popular. But those are, some really famous tracks. We had to watch a Porsche race there.
Where are they in Germany?
The Hockenheim ring, it was just, I don't know, an hour south of Frankfurt in Hockenheim. And I don't remember the name of the place where Nürburgring was.
Yeah, also don't
Yeah.
remember. The Nürburgring.
It's like outside New
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not-
somewhere by.
It's not
There's
Nuremberg.
There's Nuremberg and there's Nürburgring.
Yeah.
This is Nürburgring, though. Yeah. So I don't remember. We drove. It was probably 3 hours from Frankfurt. It was a little bit of a trek, but
Yes.
yeah, driving very slow in our old Mercedes. Remember? And then
Okay, so
you know, for Frank.
yeah, next time. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Germans travel and how they do vacation. I was thinking about, I had a warm welcome to the start of the school year here in Franklin. So we don't have any kids, so I wasn't aware that it was the first day of school. So I drove out onto Hillsborough Road. It's 35 is the speed limit. It's really easy to see there, so I'm watching, making sure I'm only driving 35. All of a sudden, there's a cop. You, here. First day of school, school zone, you're supposed to be driving 20 miles an hour. So the fact that summer's over is really freshly imprinted on my heart right now. So this is how Germans kind of travel and vacation. Summer break there for students is only 6 weeks. And however, your standard PTO is about 30 days as like a starting employee. I have friends working in Germany who have 65 days of PTO. That's excluding holidays. So Germans take their holidays and their time off very, very seriously. And they take all their days. There's none of this, oh, I don't take all my days. You know, I'm here to work at my company. No, they work, but they take their summer, especially summer vacation, very seriously. Most Germans do travel during the summer. Does anyone here work in a field where you have like German suppliers or German contacts, or you have to like work with Germans, people in Germany? Anybody? I'm a mechanical engineer, so a lot of times we're working with suppliers or vendors that are producing in Germany, and pretty much the rule is July and August, there was no one who's going to respond to your email or answer your call or anything because Germans are just gone. They don't go very far, though. Most Germans travel within Germany even, or the surrounding countries, or towards the Mediterranean Sea. So, yeah, and the cities, it's kind of interesting. The cities really take advantage of this because there's way less traffic, so that's when all the like construction happens. I'm not sure if that's similar to here, but yeah, you definitely can tell there's way less cars on the road, way more construction happening. Okay, so Germans, yeah, where do they go? They do drive. The thing is really awesome about Germany, if you ever get to go, so many things are just so close. You can go to Paris from Frankfurt with the train in 3 hours, or you can drive to northern Italy in maybe just a few hours more. Road trips are not really a thing. So when we told people in Germany that we were moving back to the U.S., we were going to drive from California to Tennessee, and that it was going to be 27 total hours, and we were going to do this 4 days, people could not even imagine that. The most common places for people to go are definitely Austria, France, Switzerland, so those kind of surrounding countries, and then Italy, Spain. They do like to go to the beach, and sometimes you'll see Germans walking around who are they love to just burn themselves orange, like they're so tan. And they've probably been to Mallorca, which is an island off of Spain. It's like the second Germany, people joke, kind of. Yeah.
I was on the Yosemite Fun Board for 10 years, and the largest number of people coming to hike in the park was from Germany.
Oh, in Yosemite. Yeah. Wow, very cool. Yeah. Yeah, so in Mallorca, which is an island off of Spain, everything's written in German. Everything is catered towards Germans. Yeah. They also travel, within Germany a lot. And as opposed to something I think is a really interesting difference is I think Americans more seek out hotels, really nice hotels that have a pool, have a gym, kind of are a little bit inclusive. Germans often say like vacation rentals or, I know Airbnbs are more popular here now, but it feels like Germans were kind of doing that a long time ago, staying in these kind of smaller apartment restaurants or mountain huts. So this is just kind of booking your travel. Sometimes they fly, sometimes they take a train. And one thing that's funny is, have you ever heard of Aldi? Oh wait, there's Aldi here. Yeah, so that's a German grocery store. Sometimes I go there when I'm feeling kind of, missing Germany. But they sell trips, actually, and that's another way, kind of how Costco does that. And that's another way that a lot of Germans will kind of book budget-friendly trips. Germans definitely are always budgeting. They're always trying to kind of cut costs. And it's very common for people to go to the same place every year. They've just kind of like your tradition. Okay, so the one kind of travel type that I wanted to highlight is hiking. So Germans love to hike. And because you have the Alps right there going through the southern part of Germany and Switzerland and Austria, the Alps, there is the most amazing hiking that you'll ever experience. Not only is the nature so cool and so beautiful and you have these complex terrains, but you can be hiking for hours and miles and kilometers in. You think you're in the absolute middle of nowhere, and then there will be a hut where you can stop and stay and eat. And it's just so dreamy. Like, that's what you want at the top of a mountain. And we don't have that here. Even though we have great hiking, I grew up in California, amazing hiking, there would never just be a fully furnished hut with a restaurant and stuff for you to stay. So this is one of my favorite things. Here are just some more kind of in this network, and it really shows you that how remote they are and how beautiful they are. So if you get to go to Germany, really try to find a way that you can do some kind of hike to one of these huts. Sometimes you don't have to hike in very far, and there will be something like that there. This is a quick picture from us when we went this past summer. This was in an area called Tannheim, which is in the Bavarian Alps. This was shot on iPhone. I mean, I thought that was a pretty cool photo. You can see kind of one of those little huts in the background. So this was definitely a highlight for me. And it has some of the best, they always will have the best kind of fatty food to fuel you back up for your hike. This is called Kaiserschmarrn, which is like little pancakes that they chop up instead of keeping them in one pancake and eat them with powdered sugar or apple cake or Käsespätzle, which are little egg noodles, cheese, or like a beef stew. So yeah, this is one of my favorite things to do in Germany, and I'm really glad I got to experience it with Taylor when we were there, and hope you do too. That's the end of my slides. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Claudia, can I just have 5 minutes? So Claudia was on our board, and she has a few little trivia questions, and we have some trivia gifts for people who win. I'll let you know you get to get your choice of pork frankfurters that come in a jar. My children, We have some herring and mustard sauce. We have
You're exempt.
Yeah.
You can't do it, no. You can't. Salzige Heringe, oh.
It sounds better when she says it. And when my kids came back, I learned that pigs are lucky pigs.
That's funny.
Lots of our exchange students and interns who've come to stay with us bring me pig things. And I've decided they're lucky, and it's brought me a lot of luck because I've gotten to meet all of you friends, all of this wonderful experience with Sister Cities and Claudia. So first,
He's exempt too. You can
can
answer any
exempt
questions.
all right. So let the games begin. Take it away.
So I am originally from Germany, and when I came to the United States and became an American citizen, I had to answer a lot of questions in order to become an American citizen. So I thought I'd do it the other way around and see if you guys could maybe answer questions that immigrants in Germany are being asked about Germany. So you heard a lot today about Germany, about the history. So this is kind of the test now at the end. And if you answer correctly, you can win this. So, and since I had actually kind of 20 of them prepared, but I'm gonna do it the other way around. Okay. Let's see here. How many states does Germany have? No, you can't answer that question. You can't either.
The man in the blue. The man in the blue. You
Yes.
16?
Yes, that is correct. Awesome. Now, who can name them? 16. Does anybody know how many were gained after the reunification? How many there are? You should know that, Taylor.
I forgot after this.
Okay. How many states did Germany gain after the reunification? It's 16 total. Yes! Yeah, that is awesome. You did it correctly. All right. All right. Which one of the following countries borders Germany? Bulgaria, Greece, Portugal, or the Czech Republic? Wow, I think, who was that? That was first you. That is absolutely correct. Awesome. Wow. It's Milka? Yes, I know. That is awesome. Very good. All right. I don't think I should ask that one. But what year was the euro introduced? I actually had to look that one up too. I forgot. Before the euro was the German mark, Deutschmark. So when was that? Nope.
99.
Yes! We got it! Awesome! I had to look that one up. I totally forgot. It's been a hot minute, hasn't it? So, how many countries belong to the European Union? I'll give you some hints. It's either 21, 23, 25, or 27.
27.
Yes! Oh my God! I am so impressed! That is very cool. I had to look that one up too, so. Very good job. This one might be a little bit easier. What animal is depicted in the coat of arms for Germany?
A bear?
Nope. Ah, bear is actually in Bavaria. So you got one right. One of the states. It's very close to the American one. Say what? Somebody say something? Eagle. Who said that? Ah, okay. So you get that. Very good. It is actually the eagle. Okay, here we got another one. All right, I'm counting on this young man here. In what year was the wall built? Anybody remember that? Maybe before you were born?
1948?
Nope.
I'm gonna guess.
Nope.
Right here.
Nope.
1956?
Nope. Yes! Who said that? 61. Very good, Bob! Yay! All right. We got only 3 more questions. Okay. Which one do you want, Bob? The herring? The Frankfurters? Kinder Schokolade? Okay. What national holiday is celebrated on October 3rd? No, you can't.
Unification Day.
Yes, we got Unification Day. Very good. Oh my God. You got 2 now. That is awesome. Okay. Okay, this is a difficult one, and I actually was wrong on that one too when I first read it. Who holds the highest office between the two? Is it the German chancellor or the president? Okay. The chancellor. No. There you go. Very good. All right. Gosh, you guys are really good. I love this one. I have to do this one because I have a dog. Okay? And a lot of people may not know this. Correct or false? If you own a dog in Germany, you have to get it registered in the town you live in, and you have to pay a dog tax. Is that correct or false? Okay, you already got too many. Who said that? Who else? You did? Okay. All right, you got the last one. And I don't know if you all knew that too, but in Germany, you do have to pay a church tax as well. So automatically out of your paycheck every month, the German government takes out, I think it's 3%. So you have to actually say that you're either a Christian or you're an atheist. There's only those two choices. So, yes. All right, do you have any questions? No? Okay. All right.
Thank you all for joining us for Passport to Germany. Any questions you have about Sister Cities? We've updated our website, sistercitiestn.org. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. It was a pleasure to have you here today. Love the jokes, love the stories, love the games, loved hearing about cars and travel, loved hearing about the internship, and we can't wait to see all the places you're going to go. Wonderful job, Liam. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.